Welcome to this very special edition of Japan's Money Numbers. This is Novid from Last Station District 4. Today on Japan's Money Numbers, which is episode 41, we are doing a special audio version of this particular show on our YouTube channel, The PlayStation Zeitgeist. People are now wondering, after the numbers that have come out from Japan concerning Final Fantasy, is this the end of the fantasy? Let's go to the money numbers, shall we? Number 1, Final Fantasy 15, both the limited and bundled editions included. From Square Enix, that premiered on the 29th of November, it only sold 600,000 copies. That's 690,471. We'll get to that number in a moment. Pokemon Sun and Pokemon Moon from Nintendo, that premiered last week, 200,051. Super Mario Maker for Nintendo 3DS premiered with about 1,700 copies. Watch Dogs 2 from Ubisoft, 39,965. All Common Rider Revolution from Bandai Namco, 23,308. Aptly Monsters Digimon Universe, Bandai Namco, sold 7,255. And Final Fantasy 15, the limited editions included for the Xbox One in Japan, 3,791. This is the hardware for the week that passed December 29th to the 4th of December. PlayStation 4 was number 1 with 11,318. Last week it was 33,859. This came on the day that Sony announced that they sold 50 million consoles of the PlayStation 4, which I am one of them, as well as they also sold more PlayStation 4 on Black Friday in the West than at any time in the PlayStation's history, boosted by the PlayStation Pro. New 3DS LL, 53,414. PlayStation Vita, 20,141. 2 3DS, 17,623. PlayStation 4 Pro, 8,032. Last week it was 8,243. It is believed to be hardware constrained, which means there's not a lot of copies of the PlayStation 4 floating around in Japan. New 3DS, 7,432. Wii U, 4,718. PlayStation 3, 704. 3DS, 368. Xbox One, 256. Last week it was 778. So no boost for the Xbox One for Final Fantasy 15 with hardware sales. And the 3DS LL, 92. Last week it was 95. The Final Fantasy numbers between generations is important to note because somebody from a message board posted this. They have a record of all of the Media Create Numbers. We already told you about the numbers for both the Final Fantasy PlayStation 4 version and the Xbox One version. Now we took a look at the systems and I've already told you how much the system sold. Right now, year to date, the PlayStation is at nearly 4 million copies in Japan. They need to sell about another 30 400,000 to reach 4 million in Japan. At the same time, the PlayStation 3 was out. It was a little bit longer. It was around 4,200,000. Final Fantasy 13 sold 1,500,000. Just let me make this clear. It sold 1,500,000. This game only sold about less than 55% less. I think it's 45 or 55% less. Between 45 to 50% less than the one with the main female character, which a lot of people liked, but me personally never felt that she was any good. Now, the numbers speak for themselves. Final Fantasy started out with 5,000, 2,000 back in the day with the Famicom computer, which we call the Nintendo system, the original Nintendo system. Final Fantasy 2 grew from that to 7,600, 6,000, then went to 1,400,000, 1,440,000. Then in the that's it, starting with Final Fantasy 4. It started 1,400,000 on the Super Famicom. Then Final Fantasy 5, 2.4 million. Then Final Fantasy 6, which was one of the biggest games in the history of Japanese gaming, the thing that changed everything and made them one of the bigger successes in Japan, and later on in the West, it was called Final Fantasy 3. Now, let's not get the nomenclature too confused, because then they decided to rebuild the whole thing with Final Fantasy 7, and you all know the story about Final Fantasy 7. Millions are dead, Cloud the hero, this, that, and the other thing. Final Fantasy 6 was 2.4 million. Then Final Fantasy 5 was 2.44 million. Then Final Fantasy 6, 2,500. Final Fantasy 7, 2,000. No, it's 3,002. 3,000,002. Final Fantasy 8, 3,000,005. Final Fantasy 9, 2.7 million. Final Fantasy X. Now this is the one that they said was more popular than any of the other Final Fantasy since 7 now. Final Fantasy 10, 2.3 million. Now remember where they started off and where they ended up. This is where they ended up. Final Fantasy 12, 2.3. In Final Fantasy 13, 1.9. That's million. The numbers speak for themselves. People are saying that with the way this thing is started, it may not even reach 1 million sales. It might be only 1.1 million by the end year to date. They have to get the 5 million they were hoping for from the rest of the world. Then we will show you a chart. It shows the lifetime to date for the PlayStation consoles when a Final Fantasy game came out. And as you can see, Final Fantasy X did well with the PlayStation 2. And then Final Fantasy VII did well with the PlayStation 1. Same thing, well, not too good with the PlayStation 3 with Final Fantasy 13. And it's not looking too bright for the PlayStation 4 with Final Fantasy 15. But these are the most sold games in the PlayStation 4 in Japan so far. Of course, Final Fantasy 15 for now, because in a couple of weeks, actually next week, Yakuza's coming out, and then we have The Last Guardian coming out. So the holiday season is ramping up over there, as well as here. Final Fantasy has the lead. This is digital sales plus all the rest, plus the bundles and all the rest of it. Then we have Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. Persona, which increased from 1.89 thousand to a whopping 300,000. So it increased from Persona 4 to Persona 5. Knack, which sold about 401,000. Dark Souls, about 400,000. Call of Duty Black Ops 3, about 4,000. Grand Theft Auto 4, nearly more than 350,000. It's 365,000. Dragon Quest Heroes, The World Trees World and the Blight Below, 360,000. Minecraft PlayStation 4 Edition, 353,000. Battlefield 4, 303,012. Note that Bloodborne was bundled. It is much higher on the list, but they don't cover their numbers for the bundle games in this particular list, which is weird. Let us continue here. But while FF is floundering, Final Fantasy 15 is the lowest opening day since Final Fantasy 3 in 1990. Persona has gained, as I mentioned. And while Tales, which Edzilla 1 sold about 500,000 copies first week, will have a new game based on Ziestra's series with a female main, we also cannot forget that Grand Blue Fantasy is also coming out for the PlayStation 4, but we haven't even seen a screenshot of this game yet. With all this competition and Dragon Quest XI coming to the PlayStation 4, 3DS, and the new Switch, which Square is hoping to make the tide turn and give it the 1 million debut for the PlayStation 4 has been long been searching for, are the days of the fantasy over? But the mobile rise in Japan comes down to 2, maybe 3 things. Since everybody's been complaining about mobile took the rights, mobile did this, mobile did that, let me explain. My opinions. Since everybody's saying so convinced that Japan and the mobile thing hurt the sales of the Final Fantasy, it's a myriad of things. We'll discuss that on our weekly pod radio show, The Weekly Side Guys, which we will tape this weekend. And I will explain more about this and how it affects everything going forward for the Japanese developers, as it were. Censorship, brand loyalty, and design related to both. The mobile games world has seen Type Moon's Fate series to become a massive hit. Idolmaster has also become a hit. Pokemon Go shook the world and Mario's yet to get in. Maybe the reason why the move to mobile is so huge is that the gadget tricks and sensuality and yet a lack of a strong censor board in mobile has brought people to mobile in droves. Another aspect is the design of the characters, much more free than other gaming products at this time since the Japanese developers and consoles are looking global and forced to censor. As we're going to talk about a lot today, we are going to talk a lot about the censorship and what's going on, and it has to be said, because if it's not said, things are really going to reach a fever pitch. I'm just gonna let everybody know the game is going to get really, really, really tense in the upcoming years. Okay, just to let y'all know. Since the Japanese are going to global, as I said before, and it could be brand loyalty. Many have not forgotten Square for not sticking with Sony and instead working with Microsoft. Coupled with a game that used some aspects of Call of Duty's level design, Final Fantasy XIII, a bland female lead, and 2 sequels that didn't push anything forward, it was no wonder why the series lost its way and made its cultural cachet in its home country. The days of Manning in the United States and Dragon Quest possibly with 11. We're not sure yet, but we got to see the numbers. 2017, that's going to be a big day. And it's going to be a big day when it comes out in Japan. We will see where the future of the Japanese industry is headed. If that thing does not sell 1 million plus or more in that particular situation, then there is changes coming. And Sony knew it, and that's why they moved towards the West. With Final Fantasy making the big bucks between Japan and the US, in these video game charts, maybe a thing of the past for the West and Japan. We'll explain more on the Weekly Zeitgeist. And we'll explain the future of the Weekly Zeitgeist as well. Thank you for listening to this very special edition of our Japan's Money Numbers. Join us at our YouTube channel where we do Let's Plays, reviews, and a whole lot more. We like to thank our sources, 4Gamer Jimatsu, the data archives from Media Create Archives, Nibel, whose Twitter handle is Nibelion, and Zugets, Daniel Ahmad. A new review is coming soon, and more stuff is on the way on our YouTube channel. And there could be even more specials dealing with the Yakuza and the Last Guardian maybe next week. And a reminder that Goddess Nor loves your patronage and not your Patreons. Thank you for listening. We will see you, and this show will see you next week. Until then, this is Novid. We'll see you on the Weekly Zeitgeist and in other places later.